Okay, how you doing everyone? Welcome to another expert panel, and today I have a very special treat for you. I have one of the internet's best copywriters, and we're literally going to prise open his brain and extract all the secrets we can, and well, do some amazing things. Now, Colin is one, as I say, of the leading internet copywriters, and I think he's done offline stuff as well as online stuff. He's worked with some, and he's been behind some of the biggest launches in recent history, and is an absolute. He is my go-to guy for copywriting, for picking his brains for, hey, does my stuff convert? Does it look okay? And we're going to talk about a lot more about what he does in just a moment. But let's, without further ado, Colin, are you there? Can you hear me okay? Is everything cool?
Everything's good on my end, Sean. Pleasure to
Okay,
be here.
excellent. Now, I'm going to do a full disclosure. This is a re-record of an interview that we did because we had a problem with the audio. So we're actually doing this from the top to make sure everything's cool. So that's why we're doing the audio checks, make sure everything's good. So full disclosure, not everything goes right, and when it does, you punt. So we're punting here. And again, this one of the things about the inner circle here is I tell you when things go right. I also tell you when things go wrong and how to get around them. So, Colin was just telling me he's actually re-recording a webinar because he was doing a live event, and the guy videoing the live event actually didn't record the video or the presentation until about 15 minutes in. So, it's just one of those
Yeah.
things. Business is business, and things
I
go on.
take all the blame. Apparently, I'm the unlucky one here. So,
There you go. Yeah, that's funny stuff. So, okay, well, I guess I've got a few questions to level at you, Colin. I guess the first one is tell us a bit about your background and how you got into copywriting, because a lot of people don't choose copywriting. They seem to fall into it. And I know that's part of your story. So tell us how that happened.
yeah, basically, in what my background is in, if you look academically, it's art. I have a degree in painting and drawing from Louisiana State University, and art is about as far away from marketing as you
Pretty
can
much.
possibly get. But when I was in college, I minored in technically it's called visual communications, but it's basically journalism, infographics, that kind of thing, because I wanted to be able to feed myself when I got out of college. So through that, I started doing like graphics and things, and I got into working for internet companies, and I worked for an internet marketing company in Baton Rouge, where Louisiana State University's campus is.
Hmm.
And when I left Baton Rouge to come to Atlanta, I kept doing the same thing. Ended up working for e-commerce store. So I was involved in internet business, but not on the writing side. And I happened to be working at a company, and one of the co-owners of that company went on to found a marketing business called StomperNet.
Hmm.
And I didn't realize it at the time, but they ended up having one of the record-breaking biggest launches ever. I think it was like 24 million bucks or something like that,
Yeah.
something insane. And I just happened to be there when they made that company, and I sort of got hired over from what I was doing, just the same sort of thing, web graphics for e-commerce,
Yeah.
doing SEO type of stuff. I happened to get hired over when they were brand new, sort of poached from the company I was at, basically. And one day, I can't remember if the copywriter was sick or we were just busy. There were like 5 of us working at the company at the time.
Hmm.
So I volunteered, and my boss at the time, Andy Jenkins, who's gone on to do Video Boss, is his last big product that he launched. Um, he said, this is pretty good. But to give some insight, what I did was took their original launch sales letter, and my job was to rewrite it to add in all the new things so that they could do a relaunch.
Yeah.
So Andy looked at my work. He said, this is pretty good. Do you like doing this? I said, sure. I didn't have any ego involved in it because I didn't really want to be a writer. I just did it because, it needed doing.
Hmm.
And I said, sure, it's pretty easy. I didn't have any trouble with it. He's like, okay, well, get good at it because you're the chief marketing copywriter from now on. So I learned on the job, and I had a lot of things that people don't get when they're starting in copywriting. Namely, I had like an audience on the prospect side, 100,000 strong, and then on the business side, I think we had something like 2,000 clients at that time.
Hmm.
Um, so between those two, I got to learn through testing in a way that a lot of beginning copywriters don't get to learn because they're not dealing with audiences that big.
Yeah.
So I did that for almost 3 years, and August of 2009 is when I left to go freelance. And since then, I've been teaching and writing and speaking and critiquing other people's copy, and it's all going very well. I like it quite a bit.
That's cool. Now I know that you left Stompernet when Andy Jenkins split, and then
Yeah.
you became his main copywriter. Is that correct?
I couldn't say if I'm his main one, but we do work together still frequently. When he did his Video Boss launch, which was his main product after he
Hmm.
left Stompernet, I did. He's the video boss, so he writes his video scripts, but I write the on-page copy, the squeeze page copy, email swipes, things like that. We just continued our working relationship that we had
That's
in
great.
Stompernet.
Hmm.
And since then he's a movie producer now. He has a movie company. That's what he sort of wanted to do all along. So that's sort of I guess you can say that he's not necessarily cashed out of the internet marketing business, but he focuses on that more. So I did Video Boss with him. I did Kajabi with him, and
Yeah, and Kajabi was a huge, huge campaign. I remember watching that intently because it's
yeah.
kind of my in my sphere of the woods, so to speak. And
Mhm.
that I mean, the conversions on that were extreme. The copywriting on that was just dead on. So
Well,
congratulations on that.
I can't take full credit because when you want to do like a $1 trial of software that is that sophisticated, it was pretty easy to make it sound like a good deal.
There you go. That's good stuff. Okay, well, I guess yeah, you've been. How long have you been? Would you put a ballpark been doing copywriting now? I mean, you've been doing it since Stompernet, and I know that was like 2006, 2007.
Yeah, that was early 2007. And I mean, before then, I'd written bits of catalog copy as needed and things like that, but I wouldn't call it like copy, like sales copy.
Hmm.
Um, I've always had a sort of uh, general interest in the topic of persuasion,
Hmm.
but not necessarily in the avenue of sales. Like I was interested in stage magicians, con artists, cult leaders. It makes me sound like a weirdo, but I sort of had like I took psychology classes in school, and those were the kind of things that interested me. Basically, people who are so persuasive that the general audience may think that they have some sort of evil superpower, when really it's more about the weaknesses we all have than a particular power an individual has. If the individual learns how to take advantage of inherent weaknesses in the human brain, because I mean, it's a computer, but it's a computer made out of meat. So it's not necessarily the best piece of hardware in the world. And there are certain, you want to call them flaws in human thinking that are common to everybody.
Hmm.
So if you learn those tricks, you can essentially, I mean, for lack of a better term, sort of hack other people's brains and put things in there that they'll think are their own ideas, which is what precedes action. And if you can dictate to people what their actions are going to be, obviously that's very useful in a sales situation.
Very much like NLP in a lot of ways.
Yeah, essentially, and NLP focuses a lot on I guess what you would say is like the input output, like the interface.
Hmm.
A lot of what I find useful about NLP isn't necessarily directly applicable to copy because it's a lot of tactile, it's a lot of visual, looking at people's faces and reading them.
Hmm.
Obviously, I don't get the benefit of that in written form or even in video form, but essentially it's the same thing. It's sort of if you know how people draw their conclusions from the information they're presented, and you can present your information in certain types, they'll absorb it. So, for example, if I want you to believe something, and as if it's indoctrination, I don't want you to have any skepticism whatsoever with me giving you this information. I'll have someone else say it and then give it to you as a quote from them. And that, that's why testimonials and endorsements are so effective, is because people tend to absorb that because they're like, oh, it's a disinterested third party. That
Hmm.
must be true. Even though I could have compensated, if you compensate, disclose. I'm not advising anybody break the rules, but if I can get a customer to say a certain thing in a certain way because I know it'll make a very effective testimonial, I have no problems asking them very leading questions to get them to say what I want them to say the exact way I want them to say it, because I know when it comes from them, it'll have the desired effect on the audience.
That's very true. Very true. Okay, well, I guess from that, how long would you say it took you to master? And I mean, I know you're one of the best copywriters out there, and I'm blowing your trumpet for you here. And he didn't program me to say that. Uh, there's, but I know you're one of
Says
the.
you, right?
Oh, that's it. Yeah, we'll slip the $5 in the mail. Yeah, but in terms of what you do now, how long would you say it took you to go from where you were as thrown in at the deep end to being a master of copywriting?
Um, I think it's in that Malcolm Gladwell book, The Tipping Point, where he talks about 10,000 hours to mastery.
I know that
And
quite. I know exactly what you're
and
saying.
and
Yeah.
and that's for the skill, right? That's
Hmm.
10,000 hours of practice, and more so than people realize, copywriting is a skill rather than a type of knowledge, right?
Hmm.
So you can study it endlessly, but you don't really learn anything until you actually do it. So it would be like trying to learn a physical sport by reading a book about it. There are plenty of photo books about martial arts, but don't expect to read a book about it and then go win a fight.
Yeah, you're not going to be Bruce Lee overnight by reading
Right,
the
right.
Jeet Kune Do books. Yeah.
Right. So the actual skill of copywriting comes from practice, and then when you take the Gladwell quote into account, about 10,000 hours, I worked at Stompernet from early 2007 to late 2009, so almost 3 years inside of there. The whole time I was involved with the organization, and in that time, I wrote their emails, I wrote their blog posts, I wrote free content pieces, I wrote sales copy. JV swipes, anything that needed letters to be typed onto a computer, I was involved with in some kind of way, all day, every day. And I had the great fortune of being paid to learn on the job. And again, in an environment with assets that most beginning copywriters don't get. So I feel like even inside of that 10,000 hour span, which 3 years works out to be at a day job, I got to learn things that most copywriters starting at the bottom will go after low paying, low risk jobs to sort of learn the ropes, right? So you'll go after, you'll get a client who doesn't have a huge list, and a successful launch might be, 5 figures for that guy. And I got my start in the deep end of the pool where our products were 4 figure price tags and our launches were in the millions. Um, so my learning experience had no curve. It was like, a straight zigzag.
Indeed.
Um,
I was a high diver.
yeah, yeah. And it's one of those things where I can't adequately explain how important that was because I didn't learn it any other way. I don't have anything to compare it to.
Hmm.
But I do see a lot of other copywriters who had to start at the bottom and work their way up sort of have trouble scaling upwards. And I have the opposite problem. I have trouble scaling downwards.
Well, it's good. It's a good problem to have. So
It is. It is.
I guess that leads me on to my next question. Would be now most people they have their kind of their mentors, the people that have influenced them. I mean, every walk of life has that. I mean, you look at the rock bands; they have their influences from the previous generation of rock bands. Metallica has their just as I was reading this earlier on. Their influences were bands that I used to follow called Motorhead and stuff like that, and all the classics. So, in terms of what you do in your business, I have my mentors, I have the people that I look up to that have influenced everything I do. But who would you say your influencers are? I know Andy Jenkins was one of them, but
Mhm.
who else? Who other in the copywriting sphere, shall we say, has influenced your work, and would you say that you look to study as well?
Um, one of the things that I found is that copywriting teachers are not necessarily the best way to learn copywriting, again, because it's such a skill-based quality.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and I think a lot of the people who are good at it don't necessarily have the skills of being a good teacher. And a lot of times, because it's such a sort of psychological thing, I feel like it's one of those things where it works best if it's internalized.
It's a good
And
point.
people who are effective at internalizing it, that's what internalizing it is you're not thinking about every step that you're doing. You're sort of working on intuition.
Mm-hmm.
And it's really hard to explain that when you go into that zone because you're not making any conscious decisions, you know? Like I've tried to mentor people through copy and I'll say, well, don't write it this way, write it that other way. And they'll say, well, why are you doing it that way? And I'm like, I don't know. It just sounds like it'll work better. You know, I couldn't tell you why, but it's sort of like a gut feeling. So
Mm-hmm.
to that end, what you want to do when you're trying to learn copy is develop that gut feeling. So what I did was look at the materials in our market that were working and try
Mm-hmm.
and find commonalities and figure out what it is about this message that's working on this particular audience. And with the goal of, I didn't just want to learn to write a sales letter because, as I mentioned, I was in charge of all the things in between our launches and our affiliate promotions and things like that. So I had to figure out how to get an audience and keep them interested, keep them primed, but also not give them too much to do so that when we wanted to sell them something, they weren't occupied,
Now
right?
that's a
They were.
fine balancing act. I
It
want to I
is.
want to dive into that just a little bit because I was talking to my Ask Sean group the other day about how to keep your list not so much warm but hot. Keep
Mhm.
them engaged. Give them stuff, but without giving them stuff to do. How do you do that? What kind of things do you do as an example to keep them interested and engaged? Do you give tips? Just you could these are 5 ways to do X, but without giving them actual other things to do. Or how do you do that?
Um, Essentially, what I tell people is I don't believe in content at all. Everything that you do that's not a direct request for money is pre-selling. So, excuse me. What I would do is, StomperNet being a large marketing company had a calendar projected out with what products we were working on releasing 6 months from now, and we knew what affiliate products we were going to promote, whether it was reciprocity from them promoting the previous thing or whether we were trying to generate
Hmm.
advanced reciprocity for the launch we had coming up, usually the same thing at the same time.
Yeah, usually I
Um,
know how that goes.
right. So we knew what the solutions were that we were going to be offering. And if you have a solution you want to sell, what you want to do when you're communicating to your audience is call out the people who have the problem that solution is going to help and sort of agitate it. So if you think about it as when people have a problem that persists, either they don't know what the solution is or they don't believe there is a solution. Either way, what they try to do is just not think about it because they don't enjoy suffering from that problem. So they sort of put it to the back of their mind. And a lot of times, especially in the niche we're talking about, like it's just stuff on the internet. So even if you have a problem, it's pretty easy to ignore, right? Like, oh, I'm going to SEO my website later. It's not
Yeah.
it's not an itch, it's not causing you any physical pain, so you can sort of put it out of your mind.
Hmm.
And what happens is that these problems remain vaguely defined in people's mind because they don't think about them. They don't
Yeah.
figure out, what is the cause of this? What is the shape, if you can think of it? And
Hmm.
that's this is a place where I think my background in art kind of helped because I think visually. So you can think of it as being blurry. The problem is blurry because they don't ever focus on it. So what you can do in your copy and your pre-selling is help them sharpen that problem so that they can see it clearly, but essentially you're dictating it to them. So if for the sake of argument, say I knew down the line I was going to be promoting an SEO solution, some software.
Hmm.
So what I would do is start talking about the problems. And as you said, like checklists of things. So 5 problems you're going to run into if you try to SEO your own website. Then in the next week, I could do, 7 things to look out for when you hire an outsourcer to do your SEO.
Mm-hmm.
And eventually what I'm doing is I'm building up their perception of the problems of doing SEO, and obviously the software that I'm going to offer you is going to hit that checklist exactly as the perfect solution.
Yeah.
What's going to happen to the audience is they're going to see that solution and they're going to say, "Man, I need something exactly like this, and boy, does it fit all my qualifications." But it's because
You've already
they've
set those.
they've forgotten that I've carved out the shape of the problem in their head, and it's using that thing we talked about where if you can make the information come from inside someone's head instead of me dictating it to you, they feel like they're making their own decision. So essentially, if I only had one point of contact, I would have to do that problem agitation in the sales copy itself,
Mm-hmm.
which makes it more visible. It's less transparent. But if I make you internalize the problem and I dictate to you your understanding of it, I'm the person who gives you the grasp of what the problem really is, then all I have to do is show you the solution and you're like, wow, I want that, right? I just have to describe it to you and it ticks all the check boxes in your head, but you're the one who brought that information to the exchange because I gave it to you earlier. So essentially that's sort of what you want to do, and the main things to pull out of that when you create that kind of content is that you want to focus on pointing out problems, things to avoid,
Mm-hmm.
gotchas, because it feels valuable and it feels altruistic.
Yeah.
Like if you tell somebody, hey, there's a pothole there, don't step in it, they see no benefit for you. They see no like selfish reason you would tell them that because they can't see as far ahead as what you've got planned.
Yeah.
So it gives you that halo effect where they feel like, man, this guy gives me all kind of useful information. But the fact is, avoidance is negative action. I'm telling you to avoid things you might never actually have encountered, and you have no way to know because I've told you how to avoid it. So it feels it feels valuable to you, but you're not doing anything. I'm essentially clearing your plate of all the obstacles and defining the problem so that when I present the product to you, it's on an empty stage. You have nothing else going on, but you don't know how to make progress. I've eliminated everything that's holding you back, and now the only thing left to do is buy the object that'll move you forward.
Excellent.
Since there are no more obstacles.
Excellent. Okay, that's great. I love that, and that is very powerful stuff, especially when you come to, like you say, keeping your list warm. I'm very much about giving content, so that when and seeding what's coming up in a very subtle way, very much like you're saying there. So that's perfect. That's
And
bang on cue.
it's actually clever, and this sort of sums up my whole philosophy in copywriting, is that I don't want to actually have to write a whole lot to sell you. I want to do it with as few things as possible because I want you to make your own decision. And I want you to do it quickly.
Mm-hmm.
So there's this psychological effect. I forget the actual name of it, but I call it the preacher paradox.
Mm-hmm.
And it's essentially if you have a minister or something on the pulpit and he's preaching out against a certain vice,
Mm-hmm.
say adultery, you would presume that since he's thumping on the pulpit about it, that he himself does not commit adultery, that he's totally faithful in all his relationships because he's speaking out against it, right? In fact, there's the biblical proverb of let he who casts the first stone if he's without sin, right?
Mm-hmm.
So people sort of presume that preacher is guilt-free on that particular item. As you know from many, many, many scandals over the years, that's definitely not always the case, and that's one of the reasons why it's so shocking, is because that guy is telling us not to do it, and he's doing it himself. He's a hypocrite.
Like Jim Baker and stuff like that, yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But the reason that happens is if you speak out against something, if you say, I will not stand for this, people will presume that you know the solution to that problem, that you know the opposite. The same thing happens for doctors. If a doctor diagnoses you, you say, okay, well, how do we cure it? That doesn't mean there's a cure. He can diagnose you very accurately and have no idea how to cure what's wrong with you. But you presume he does because people automatically jump to the conclusion that if you know the problem, then you must know the solution.
Hmm.
So what happens is if you do this pre-selling method I talked about, where you, for again the SEO software example, and we talk at length, here's what's wrong with SEO, here's all the problems you're going to run into. You start to subconsciously presume that if I know all the problems, I must know the solution.
Yeah.
So if I don't make you lose that perception, if I don't do anything to violate it, you'll continue to believe it. So now all I have to do is point to that product and say, hey, check out this SEO product. And all of those presumptions that I know what I'm talking about get applied to that product.
It's like the missing piece of the jigsaw. I love that.
Exactly. So essentially, if you do things this way, it almost takes away the entire need to sell because they skip right over it because they don't need it. They're already pre-sold. You've already created a need in them for the product, which is great because you're essentially boosting the conversion of your sales letter by making people bypass it altogether.
The complete opposite of logic, but it is what works because, like you say, you're crafting the message and the
Right.
desire before they even hit the sales funnel, and then when they get to the sales funnel, whatever it may be, boom, they're automatically it's like, oh, this is what I
Right.
needed. Boom, every point is hit. So
Right.
that's
It's
awesome.
one of those things where the mere existence of a sales letter is the justification they need to buy it. The fact that it is for sale, they're ready to buy.
That's good. I love that. I love that. And it's exactly what I'm doing. Funnily enough, you're talking about SEO software. At the time we're recording this, I'm about to release some SEO software, and I'm doing exactly what you're saying. All my stuff is moving towards that goal. So
Yeah.
that's brilliant. It's good to know that I'm doing things right. I guess the next question I'll have then is, what would you say are the main elements of good copy? Now, assuming that they've done all the pre-sell and they've done all the seeding and everything else, how would you say that? What are the main elements that you need to address in your sales message? Be it emails, sales letter, video. Is there any overriding elements that should be in every single piece?
Um, it's funny you bring that up because we mentioned that I have to redo another talk later today. That talk is about four questions and answers for creating an irresistible hook, is what it's called. But essentially, I'll give you the four questions here. It's what I think are the four main facets you need to make, I guess you would call it an action-driven piece. Not necessarily a sale. It doesn't have to drive a sale, but if you want a certain behavior to come about as a result of a piece of writing, I think you need four things. You need to answer four questions, and they are why you, why me, why this, and why now. And if you can answer those four in copy form, that's your best shot at delivering a concise communication that should make something happen. Now, the why you is the prospect part. So you immediately want to grab that in your subject line or your headline or your forum thread title, whatever the case is. You want to call out your ideal prospect. And the easiest way I know to do that is to call out the problem that they have, right? Because if you suffer from a problem and you see something in your environment that's calling your attention to it, it's definitely going to pull your attention.
Hmm.
And now that I've got it, I can do something with it. So that's how you answer, why you, the prospect. Why am I even talking to you?
Yeah.
Then another one that most people leave out to their detriment is why me? Why are you the person to talk to me about this problem that I'm having? What is it about you? And that can be, I represent the people who have made the solution if you're just sales,
Hmm.
or it can be I created the solution to this problem. It doesn't matter which, but you need a voice, you need a face. It needs to be from someone, because if you don't do that, you're missing out on the huge benefit of rapport,
Hmm.
right? So even if you look at huge corporations that don't really have like one single figurehead, they'll still pick somebody to be the voice. So Google is a good example since we're still talking SEO. They have Matt Cutts
Hmm.
to be the guy with the face and the voice
Yep.
because that if they just issued mandates from Google Inc., with no voice and no face to interact with, people
Yeah.
would not it would not have the same effect
That's
as it
very
does
true.
now that they've chosen a spokesman.
Another
And
another example, just while thinking about it, is because I was thinking about this and explaining this to someone else, a similar thing is like Progressive. They have the spokesperson of the girl who works in this kind of
oh, right, with
virtual
the
studio.
outrageously red lipstick.
Yeah,
Yeah,
Flo or whatever her name is.
yeah,
Or the
that's
other
right,
one
that's
is
right.
Geico. They have the Gecko. That's kind of their unofficial spokesperson. You have a rapport with this little tiny computer generated Gecko. But
Right.
it's the engagement right there that that's if you call Geico, you think of the Gecko. If you call Progressive, you think about this crazy girl with the bright red lips and everything
Right,
else.
right,
So
and you have Allstate. It's been a number of years since he did it, but the actor who does the
oh,
Allstate
yeah,
commercial,
the very deep booming voice. The guy,
yes,
yeah,
yes,
from I can't remember his name, but from 24, he was the
yeah,
president. Yeah.
exactly. He was the president on 24, and that's why they hired him, is to get that authority figure perception. It's been years since he was on 24, but
Hmm.
at the time that they hired him, he was recognizable. I think it's President Palmer, maybe. I
That's
can't
right.
remember
That's
his
right.
name.
Palmer. Yeah.
Yeah.
God blimey, I've got another fan who watches that show.
um, but yeah, so you know, if it's a sales letter, you definitely need a photo of you in there. If it is a sales video, you want to put yourself on camera. That's something. Knowing how important that was, being a writer who worked in a cubicle at an office for years, when I went out on my own, I knew that I had to become better on video. It's something I always avoided. I'm not comfortable with it. And inside the space of a year, by forcing myself to do it, I speak on stage at events now because portraying a voice for your ideas is so important. It acts as a container, and it's a shortcut to a USP, a unique selling proposition. Because I can spend all the time explaining to you why the product is awesome, but if I spend a little bit of time getting you to believe that I'm awesome, I can skip all that because all I have to do is say, hey, check this product out. And because you think I'm awesome, you know that I'm not going to recommend anything to you that's bad. So I don't have to oversell it. And it's much easier for people to like people than it is for people to like things.
It's very true.
And again, if you're in this particular kind of business that we're in, where you're building up a following, trying to turn yourself into, a guru, for lack of a better term,
Hmm.
um, you want to build that investment in your personality because it's a package for your information,
Very
right?
much the
Like
case.
how many different people could your customers buy SEO software from right now? Like a
Exactly.
million,
Yeah.
right? But yours is your solution. It's your methods, it's your experience, and it's
Hmm.
packaged up. Now, of course, SEO is SEO. There's probably tons of different places they could get the exact same information, but the fact that it comes from you matters to your audience because you're verifying that,
Yep.
yes, this is what I think works. And that's what they want out of these sort of figures. So it's very, very important that you answer the question, why me? Why am I the person to tell this to you? Because it becomes a brand that matters to people. And
Exactly.
that's sort of why, when you participate, say, as an affiliate in these huge launches, and you think, why is anybody ever going to buy from me instead of these other guru types? And it's the reason they will is if you make yourself matter as a container, as a delivery mechanism for this information, because it gives people a choice, right?
Yep.
Like if you have a soda machine and none of the sodas have labels, it really doesn't matter which one you pick, right? Like most of the colas are going to taste the same to you. But then all of a sudden, when they have labels that mean things to you, and say, "Oh, well, I'm a Coke person and not a Pepsi person," now you have a meaningful choice between sugar waters, right? Like
There
before
you
it's
go.
just all the same thing. But what we're talking about is making yourself into a label, into a package that has a meaning, so that people can say that guy is the guy for me,
That's very true.
versus buying it from anyone else. So
No, you're absolutely right. That's one of the core essence of branding, and you're very much cementing yourself as the go-to person for the trust figures. Because certainly in our industry, IM, there are a lot of, we'll call them gurus,
right,
and that couldn't market their way out of a paper bag. It's just because they've got the recognizable name, because they've been emailed everywhere, that people cement these are the top dogs. But then
sure,
the funny thing is, a lot of them, because they've burnt out their names, start using paid actors to be now their spokesperson, because
right,
their reputation is so shot to crap that
yes,
they can't put themselves out on the camera. But here's the thing, guys, that exactly what Colin is saying. This is one of the reasons Well, it's two reasons. First reason that I get in front of a camera myself is because I suck at writing. With dyslexia and ADHD, I hate writing. And although I can do copywriting, I try to avoid it like the plague because for me that's like pulling teeth or being under thumb screws. So my choice was either knuckle down and do that or stand in front of a camera, which at first I hated doing as well, just like Colin. Felt very uncomfortable and very self-conscious. But I learnt through a lot of my studies of sales and marketing, and especially with visual communication, is that 7% of what you say is how, it's only 7% is how important is what you say. It's how you say it, your body language and everything else, the visual communication that you generate when you're engaging with people and generating that rapport. That's 93%. Only 7% is what you say. The 93% is everything else that you wrap up in this container. So exactly what Colin's saying there. If you then apply in that last 7% all of these, address all these other factors, and then you present that with confidence and everything else, you'll have an entire audience. I mean, I speak in front of crowds of anywhere from a couple of hundred to a few thousand people, and you can have that entire audience eating out of your hand and literally engaged in everything you do. Now, there might be some people that are not interested in what you have to say, but you can segment and then focus on those that are going to respond to it.
Right.
And that's a very important factor.
That's why building up the likability in who you are and what you stand for, and even details that are unrelated to what your industry is, like what sports team you like, what TV shows you like we talked about 24. I was wearing a comic book T-shirt before I gave a talk in Vegas, and I made friends with a guy that we're doing business together because he's like, I had that comic book. It was like a cover of like Secret Wars #4 with Black Spider-Man on the cover. So he's like, I had that when I was a kid. And I'm like, these things that build up your personality are important because, like you said, if I make an offer to you, there are some people on your list that don't care about SEO. But they're not going to run away from you because they know there's more to you than that one thing. They'll just sort of ignore what's irrelevant to them and focus only on what is relevant. And it's another interesting psychological effect that people forget about, is that people will literally forget the things that are irrelevant to them. So if you talk to people about a bunch of diverse things and you mix it up, it will seem like over time that you literally only talk to them about things that they're interested in because they will forget all of the times that they weren't. This is why another sneaky kind of person that I've studied to learn persuasion stuff are fraudulent psychics, or mediums who lie and say they can talk to your dead relatives, and really they're just making guesses. A really good book on the subject is The Full Facts Book of Cold Reading by a guy named Ian Rowland. And it's essentially all these techniques for making guesses for strangers where they feel like you're psychic. You know so much about them, but you're just making generalized guesses. And as they eliminate things, you get rid of them. But by the end of it, they've ignored and forgotten all the times you were wrong. So you can say 100 things, only 12 of which are accurate. They'll focus in on those 12 relevant things and forget all the wrong guesses that you made.
Amazing.
Right. So this mechanism works the same way for your list. So focus on pleasing small portions of them at a time instead of everybody at once, and talk to them constantly. But as long as you're making yourself likable, and you include a little anecdote in an email, if they get to the end and aren't interested in clicking on what you're telling them to click on, at least they had a funny story or got a little joke out of it, and they don't feel mad because you haven't wasted their time.
Yeah, that's a very important factor, because if you get your prospects feeling that you've wasted their time, they're not going to open any other emails you send, and eventually you burnt out your list.
And it literally takes a smile. If you can give someone a smile before you ask for a click, that's all it takes. Like, and you don't even have to make it up. Like, how many funny, silly pictures are there on the internet that you can attach and figure out a way to talk about that in relation to what your email is? And even if they don't get anything out of the message, at least you gave them a chuckle. Like, no one's going to be mad at you if you make them smile if they don't want to do the click that you gave them to click. Plus, if you make them smile and then get them to click, that's even better because they're already in a good mood before they hit whatever page you're pointing them to. But is it's very important to keep that that good relationship going, but don't ever be afraid to talk only to a certain segment of your overall list. As long as you try and hit every group that's in there, you should be good. Don't leave anyone out, but don't be afraid to say, I'm only talking to you guys over here in the left corner right now, and everybody else in the room just, if you're interested, come over. If not, just hang out. We'll talk to you in a minute.
Yeah, that's very good stuff. Now, it kind of leads me to my next question, because this one's been on my mind for a while. Now, I know copywriting and the basic elements of copywriting have been refined over the years, especially with the advent of the internet and different technologies, but some of the base principles have been in existence since the 1800s.
Hmm.
And with the kind of direct mail thing that really started, and long form letters and all the rest of it, I mean, those elements still are used a lot today, but there's been a big shift towards, if you look at a lot of the ClickBank launches, they don't do that anymore. They go straight to video, and only a video and nothing else but the video. So let me ask you, does long form sales copy still work online?
Yes, but well, one of the things that irritates me about what it is I do for a living is that it's called copywriting with an emphasis on the writing.
Yes.
And like you said, it's very, very small portion of what it is that we actually do has to do with the word selection, what people would think of as writing,
Hmm.
which is why it irritates me when you see these things that are like, 50 power words that sell. And it's like, that's just a thesaurus. That's just adjectives. Like that doesn't actually do anything. What copywriting is, and it's funny you mentioned the 1800s. I think it's way, way back in like the turn of the century, the 1900s, the Robert Collier letter book. And he said
Yes.
that, let's see, what's the quote I'm thinking of? That copywriting is salesmanship in print.
Yes.
So it makes sense that when the technology allows it, you shift to video because video is a step closer to an actual salesman interaction,
Hmm.
one step removed from writing it down on a piece of paper. There's so much more going on visually in a video that I would have to take great effort to communicate in written form. So, for example, when people see you and you have the well manicured goatee and you have the expensive headset and you have the tie and the shirt, and then you see me and mine's taped together and I have bedhead and I'm in a t-shirt, there's a different impression created by those two that if I were a writer trying to sell something from you to your audience versus selling something from me to my audience, I would have to express a lot of things in copy that I just don't have to when I can show them to you visually.
Hmm.
A picture is worth 1,000 words, and video is 24 pictures per second at a minimum. Much, much more with HD video.
Yeah.
But so I understand the moving away from copy and towards video. The reason you used copy in the first place was because the internet used to be a text-based medium, and the medium itself is changing. So you want to play to the strengths of your medium. Now, that being said, I would never recommend a video and only a video because I know personally I get bored looking at the video and I start reading what's on the page. Like if you've ever not everybody does this because like you mentioned people with reading deficiencies like dyslexia or ADHD don't always do this because for them reading is an effort. But for me, I literally, if you put something in front of me and I start to zone out, I will read it. So if I'm eating cereal at the breakfast table, I will start reading the cereal box simply because it's in front of me and it's got words on it, so I start reading it. So when you have a video and then you also have selling words on the page, if they start to zone out in the video, I can't see that it hurts you to have things on the page that are also going to sell them because it might distract them from the video. But if you're distracting them with yet more salesmanship, how does that hurt?
Exactly. No, I very
So,
much
so
agree.
what I tend to do is since video is an emotional medium because visual communication bypasses the language center of the brain and goes directly to the meaning part,
Hmm.
I like to put the emotional messaging in the video and the more logical justification stuff can still be in the video, but you want that repeated in print because the part of your brain that understands language and can turn little shapes of letters into words that have meaning, that part of your brain is analytical. That's the part of your brain that understands justifications and logic. So if you put things like the guarantee and the feature list and details about your support, things that prop up an emotional decision to buy in print form, it has that effect I talked about where they're like, okay, it's got a guarantee, it's got the feature, like it confirms that this is an actual product and they don't have to read it word for word. Just the fact that it exists on the page is confirmation that this is a legit thing that's worth buying.
Makes sense. Makes sense. Well, okay, that leads me into the next thing because when you're doing video or doing long form sales copy, the headline or your main first impact message is critical to get them to hook, to keep going, to be engaged, unless you've done all your pre-selling stuff. But let me ask you, how do you come up with headlines that convert, that hook them in, if it's a cold or a less than lukewarm prospect, shall we say? What do you do? What's the elements you put in a headline to get them in there? Because I've heard recently that the headline is like 70% of the value of your entire sales page. So I know that must be pretty important. What's your kind of formula? How would you tackle that?
The I do have a formula, and the way I arrived at the formula is because I'm not the kind of writer that does what a lot of copywriters do, where it's like I come up with 50 completely different headlines, and then we split test them. I'm not that kind of writer. I prefer to figure out what the core problem is that this product is going to solve, and I go for the product solution thing, where in the pre-head I'll call out the main problem, and then in the headline I promise a solution to that problem, and if possible a total reversal. So not only are you going to lose weight, but you're going to get fit, right? Like a total reversal from the negative state of suffering from the problem. And then in the post headline I'll promise an additional big benefit that makes this offer go above and beyond what other people are offering. So, an example to continue with the weight loss one, sick of diets that don't work, this new pill will make you lose weight, not only lose weight, but you'll actually become fit, and you'll do it in 6 weeks or less, right? Like that's the 1, 2, 3 combo to where I hit you with the problem that calls you out of the general population, so you know I'm talking to you. Then I promise you a total solution, and you're like, okay, that sounds good. And then by offering that additional benefit, you're like, okay, I'm going to keep reading. And that's all the headline's supposed to do, is get you a little bit deeper in. And that's the formula I use all the time. And if I'm writing multiple variants, it fits that pattern. And that's the pattern I recommend to everybody, because if you have even if you have a warmed up audience, that headline confirms that they're in the right place, the same way it calls people out of the general population in a cold audience or an undifferentiated audience.
That's very, very powerful. And you're right, it's the problem solution formula. That's what I've done a lot in the past as well. And every time I've tried to move away from that to something else, always had less conversion. So
and I mean that's not to say other things don't work. That's just my go-to formula, and it's worked enough to where I don't have to compete with it. I'm happy with the way that formula works for the way that I write, and obviously my clients are happy with that particular formula. It just makes it easy. That's the way I write. I come up with templates because, like I said, I looked at all these other letters that were working, and I found the commonalities, and I built a template up out of that. And I try to fit everything into that template because I know it's effective, and I modify it where needed. But that's the kind of writer I am, where I want to find the thing that works because it's got the right ingredients for making one person to another. How can I get you to make a decision, right? It seems like there's one good way to do that, and that's what I'm trying to arrive at with my template, is what's the easiest, most concise, simplest way to do that without having to become a salesman. and that's what I go for.
That's very, very good. And that's exactly what I try and teach a lot of people as well, is when they're doing their squeeze pages, their, whatever action you're trying to take, do it right from that place of problem solution. And
Hmm.
it seems to work very well. But that kind of leads me on to the next thing, because one thing I'm seeing a lot of with sales pages is graphics that just don't work.
Hmm.
They put things in there completely randomly all over the sales page, and they're not congruent to the sales message. What do you try and do? Do you think that visual elements in your sales copy actually work? And if they do, what's your kind of philosophy on visual elements?
Um,
Now, coming from your art background, I'm very curious to see what you say about this.
yeah, and it's interesting because I approach it in a way that might not make sense if you know I come from an art background. Because when I write in like the equivalent of Notepad. I use EditPad Pro. It's basically like a trumped up Notepad with a spell checker in it. But I write in raw text with no decoration, no bold, no colors, no anything, because I want the text to be good, right? Like if you were reading
It's
it,
an interesting perspective.
yeah, if you were reading it in novel format, I would want you to be moved by the words themselves and not tricked by gimmicks of the copy. I want it so that if you actually take the time to read it, that is a rewarding experience. So I focus on that first, and then when you get into the phase where graphics are being done, um, the mistakes people make with graphics are thinking that the fact that there's a picture there is good, but it's not. The picture has to support the text. It has to continue the argument. So if you look at the graphics you have, are they pushing the sale in any way? Are they illustrating some point from the copy? Or are they an interest graphic designed to catch a skimmer and pull them into the copy? Is it meant to be a proof or trust element? So some of the graphics I recommend in a sales letter would be, like we talked about, an image of the person speaking, right?
Hmm.
What I recommend is at the beginning of the letter, you try and get an authority picture. So a picture of, like a business portrait,
Hmm.
or if you have one, a picture of you speaking or teaching in front of an audience. That would be ideal because it instantly establishes that you're an authority. But at the end of the letter, after you've told your personal story and talked about struggles and everything, I recommend you put a casual picture because it supports the feeling that people get that they're getting to know you as they read the letter. It's subtle, but it's a visual thing that works. Another graphic that I like to tell people to have is for the guarantee and for your checkout button, you want trust images. So like the little credit card logos
Hmm.
by your buy button and by your guarantee, any kind of seal looking thing, an official looking graphical dealie. And then on your shopping cart, uh, something similar to Hacker Safe, the little lock
Yeah.
logo of some kind. It doesn't even have to be official. We've tested generic ones that we just made ourselves. Just the existence of the graphic there makes it look like a legit thing. It's like if you walked into a store and by the register they had the credit card logos, but they were hand drawn on tissue paper, that would be different. That's quite a bit different than the actual sticker that the credit card company themselves gives you, right? It gives a whole different
Yeah.
impression.
Yeah. That's a very
So,
good thing. I like that. That's a good analogy.
and then when it comes to the product, one thing I recommend is that if you have an all-encompassing course that has multiple modules that sort of fit together into a whole, you want to use a visual metaphor. And you mentioned it earlier, like the puzzle piece. That's a good visual metaphor to use where you want to show people. I've used like a pie chart with different wedges. You want to show people a visual so that they understand there's a whole,
Hmm.
and each piece of your product fills it in so that the whole is complete. So what that does psychologically is that they want this because it's not missing anything and it covers every aspect of the problem that they're trying to solve. And it's as simple as a graphic that creates that impression, but if you don't bother to create it, people won't have that perception. Another mistake people make is when they'll have multiple modules or components to their product,
Yeah.
and they'll use the same box shot for like module one, module two, like it's the same graphic. You're losing all the benefit. It becomes nothing more than a fancy looking bullet if
Yeah.
you do that. So what I would recommend in a case like that is grab a screenshot from inside the video that's interesting and use that thumbnail as your graphic for each video module because, like, look at YouTube search results. That's what they do. They pull a random slide from the middle because that's what's interesting, right?
That's very good point.
So that's the main thing to understand with graphics is you want to focus on the ones that actually have an effect on the sale, that move the argument forward. You don't want to punctuate with a graphic just because you think there's too much text there. If you have a big wall of text and you're trying to break it up, to me it's better to figure out how to trim the text down, maybe break it into some bullets, pull out some information and center it, break up the text itself rather than insert a graphic for no reason.
Interesting, interesting. Now, you talk about bullets. I know specifically you have a concept with bullets that about people on the fence. Remind me what that is, because I heard you say this before. I want to.
Yeah, I've learned this. I think it was Gary Bencivenga that said, like, if you think of the bullets as actual bullets, each one should be shooting one more person off of the fence. So you want to think of each bullet as sort of making a different point about your product, so that you're sort of hitting that checklist. And for me, since I define the problem as part of the conversation, it's really easy for me to make a bullet that hits every problem point because I'm just reversing the list of negative bullets that I've already given. But what I start with when I'm developing the bullets, and this is a formula I learned from Andy Jenkins. I don't know where he got it from. I don't think he invented it. Everybody knows feature and benefit pairings. But I take it one step further, and it's a feature and a benefit and an advantage. And what the advantage allows you to do is define your features and benefits in a way where having them is much better than not having them. And it's a subtle way to make your product stand out from competing products.
Yeah.
And that's something you definitely want to do. Like in the 4 questions I said you needed to answer, why this is about your product. And if you don't give people reason to understand that even in light of competing solutions, there's a reason for your product to exist. There's something unique about it that those other ones don't do. And if you don't give your product something like that, if you pretend competing products don't exist, you're not going to sell as much, because there are people who will see your offer and say, that's great, let me go see what else is out there that's like this.
Yeah.
But if you take the time when you've bothered to capture their attention and you put these advantages into your copy in these bullet forms, what that means is that when they go look at a competing product and it doesn't have that feature, that means it lacks the advantage, which makes it look bad. So you can literally turn your competing advertisements against themselves by including the advantage part. So to give an example, let's see if I can think of one related to SEO software. So you'd have a feature, let's say it has a timeout feature so that it doesn't trigger Google's detection mechanism to shut you out because you're abusing their API or whatever the case is, right?
Yeah.
Like, it does do that for some scrapers, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so the feature is that it has this timeout thing. The benefit is that Google won't lock your IP address out of using their search results. The advantage is you can use this tool continuously and not ever worry about it ceasing to work.
I like that.
So now, when someone goes and looks at a competing product and it doesn't have a timeout feature, now all of a sudden it's not just like, okay, this one has it, this one doesn't. They know what the detriment is and what a disadvantage they're going to be at is. So
that's very clever.
Yeah, if the competing product doesn't even mention that feature, now all of a sudden it seems like they're hiding something, even though they could very well have that feature and they just didn't think of a way to explain it. It sort of ties into another TV show that I like, is Mad Men.
Oh yes.
And one of the first season episodes, they tell the real story, even though they're a fictional ad company, of the Lucky Strike cigarette campaign, where they came up with the slogan, "It's toasted. All smoking tobacco is toasted." But they made the claim first, so now all the other cigarette manufacturers can say is, ours is toasted too. Even though they were all toasted forever. Like
Yeah.
that's how you make the tobacco smokable, is by toasting it. The Schlitz beer campaign from I think it was the 50s, where they talked about how much attention they paid to purifying their water. All beer manufacturers and brewers purify their water, but Schlitz put the focus on it, with the implication being those other guys are like making their beer out of dirty sewer water. You know? It's not the case, but because they put the attention on it, now all of a sudden theirs is like the purer, cleaner water beer,
Hmm.
even though they're all like that. Like it's industrial standard that they all use the same purification methods.
That's funny, and it's the same. It's the me first thing, and
Yeah,
then you've got the perceptions. Well, I do too. And,
yeah,
it sounds them whining afterwards if anyone else says, "Well, we also do that," because you got there first. You've stamped your authority, and in the minds of the prospect,
right.
that puts you as in the lead position, which is very, very powerful.
Yeah, and the structure of those bullets again is feature, advantage, benefit. So you can think of it as this product has X, which means you get Y, so you can Z.
That's it. That's the acronym FAB. You got to be fab with each one of your bullets.
Hmm.
So there
Yeah,
you go, like that. Feature, advantage, and benefit. I love that. That's great.
yeah, and
Oh,
then, and then,
and
and
I
then
learned something today. That's good. I love
Here-
that.
here's another tip. I talked about that problem agitation.
Yep.
If you start with the feature, advantage, benefit bullets of the product, because you know what the product is, you can take those and reverse them into the negative. And this is something that I developed myself after I learned the FAB formula from Jenkins. And it's the FDD formula, which is you take the positive version of the bullet you have and reverse it so that you figure out what the flaw, the detriment, and the disadvantage is to not having that particular feature. And those help you create those bullets that define the problem, and not only define the problem as in not solving it and suffering from it, but you can actually subtly disparage competing solutions because of the way you describe the problem.
Interesting. Give me an example of one of those.
Okay, so if we take the exact same example that we use for the SEO software, you could say you've used software that just hammers at Google's results with a scraper, and the software ends up getting your IP banned, and now you can't even use software that you paid $100 for.
Beautiful. Beautiful.
So that would be in the problem description of creating the case for this particular product. And now all of a sudden, a feature that they didn't even know existed, by the time they read that feature in the positive bullet, it's a definite must-have.
Yeah. Love it. Love it. That's brilliant. I'm learning all sorts of new stuff here today. I've just finished writing a very detailed sales page. I'm going to have to go back and look at everything and apply some of the stuff we talked about today. And if my wife is, she's in the other office right now. Because she did everything in graphical form and does it. So if I start going around changing everything now, she's going to kill me, and it's all your fault. Okay, so I guess we've got a lot of people out there right now. You've got years of experience. I know
Right.
hiring you is a very expensive prospect because you are one of the masters of copywriting. Now, I'm not saying that to be a negative. It's actually good because
Right.
having a good copywriter behind you is one of the biggest advantages you can have. But there's some entrepreneurs out there just starting out. How does an entrepreneur get started and literally dive in to copywriting and kind of figure things out?
Um, Generally speaking, if you take the problem solution approach, like you said, it's not so much careful word selection, or people call copywriters wordsmiths. That really irks me. I hate being called a wordsmith. um, it learns salesmanship first, and if you can learn salesmanship and you can get in front of a video, or you can type decently, grammatically correct and spell, or have an editor fix it up for you if you can't, or even dictate it. If you can dictate it and then have someone type it out for you, that works too. But again, it's salesmanship in print. So if you learn good salesmanship, you will know reading copy what's good and what's not. And that's the most important thing if you are at a point where you have to do this stuff yourself, or get someone on a budget, because that's a big problem. There's two types of copywriters that don't charge a lot. They're the kind that are just starting out and don't have the confidence or the results they feel it takes, and they're actually good raw talents that just haven't been around enough to know how much they can charge for what they do. And then there are people who are actually not very good at writing sales copy, and what they charge is the most they can get based on the results they're capable of generating. The problem is if you don't understand copy and you go to hire these two guys, you literally can't tell the difference. Whereas the first guy, you want to throw all the work you can at that guy and keep him in your pocket until he figures out how much he could be charging. Not in a bad way. Treat him really well. If someone's undervaluing themselves, it's easy to be like 2% more generous than they're expecting, and they'll love you to death, even though they're worth 10 times what you're paying them.
Yeah.
Whereas these crappy guys, if you don't know what you're paying for and you're hiring them and you're not getting the results, you might think, well, I paid that guy, so his stuff must work. It must be something else. And that wouldn't be the case, because there's no governing body that vets copywriters. Anyone can hang up their shingle, and even if their portfolio looks good, that doesn't mean it converts. Especially if you can't tell the difference between what works in copy and what doesn't. And the key to figuring out is knowing salesmanship. So if you know salesmanship, if you study selling, I would recommend like books on cold calling or any of like Zig Ziglar's face-to-face selling books. The spirit of what sales copy is comes from that. And if a writer is writing and it reads more like a novel or a short story, that's not going to work for you. You need to find somebody who understands that they're putting selling into print, and that's it.
That's good. Now, one thing I've heard you say before is that that if they start doing it themselves, they're going to be as good as the starting copywriters who's charging a budget in many ways. Would you say that?
If you're hiring a budget copywriter and they're the kind of copywriter that does not have the experience, that does not have the skill, and you are yourself a capable writer, not necessarily like, I'm going to be Hemingway, but I mean, you can string a sentence together and the words are spelled right and the grammar is correct and things like that. It's understandable. Other people can understand what you've written. If you can manage that, the beginning copywriter has no more experience than you do, and you may as well give it a shot because you don't have to do the research about who you are or what your product is. If you know those things better than anybody else, take a shot at it at first, especially when you learn a little bit about selling and figuring out what the problems and solutions are around your product, because you're going to be at least as good as a guy who doesn't charge very much.
Now, this leads on to one thing. Now, this is something that I know you do. Now, if they're just starting out themselves, they're going to, put together, they're hitting the 4 points, the why you, why me, what is this, and why they need to get it now. Write those down, by the way. Did I get those right? I just want to make sure.
It's why me, why you, why this, why now.
That's it. I couldn't remember the last exact wording, but yeah. If they're writing it themselves, they're putting all this down, they could actually hire you, one of the premium copywriters out there, to actually look over their copy and give them pointers. Now, how do you do that? What's your process for doing that?
You're right. Several copywriters besides me do this sort of thing. And again, for me, it's because I charge so much to write a letter that a lot of the people I interact with building an audience online just simply are not at the level where they can afford me as a copywriter. And I don't want to lower my rates because then it devalues the perception of my product. And that's another tip in and of itself. So what I started doing is offering this review service. And I didn't originate it, but a lot of people in my copy circles have started doing it too. So it's not hard to find a premium copywriter who offers a much cheaper review service. But what I do is I'll read the letter as a customer would. Then I read it again and take notes. And then I sleep on it if possible, depending on your deadline. Because that's how my brain works. If I pack something in there and leave it alone, things start happening to it. And then the next day I read it again, take another round of notes, and then I record an audio explanation of all the fixes things to cut, things to add, things to move, whatever the case may be. And then you would get the notes, which are in mind map format, and the audio recording. So it's essentially a copy tutorial, but customized to your letter. So some other people will just take it and punch it up directly in the thing, in the letter. But my goal in doing the reviews is to write less. Like, if I'm going to do a review, I don't want to do the writing part too. That's separate. You could actually hire me to do the rewriting at a day rate, but for the review, it's just me telling you what to fix, which is great because I love getting paid to tell people that their copy is bad and needs fixing. I could do that all day long. But yeah, it's essentially a customized tutorial for your letter, and I don't just explain what to change, but why. And usually it ends up being very, because of the way I work as a copywriter, you usually end up with a nice template that you can use for other offers too, because that's just the way I do stuff.
And that's brilliant because that gives you then the user, the watcher right now, the person listening to this, the advantage because they suddenly realize, okay, I've got this element, but this is where I need to change it. And now I've got the formula, and now I can apply that when I do another sales letter or when I move on. They start seeing, okay, well, I didn't quite do it here, but Colin said this is what I need to do, and it sticks in your head that you've now got kind of your copywriting mentor who has pointed you in the right direction, giving you a course correction, and now you're heading off to success. And that's very, very important. And again, saves the prospect or the viewer here a absolute fortune, but they get to leverage your knowledge and skills at a massive discount. So it's a great way to get a premium copywriter at a budget which probably we shouldn't be saying because I know you don't want to take away from your main business, but it's a great way to get started if you are on a budget.
Right. I mean, it's the difference between 5 figures and several months worth of work from me, or $500 and I can turn it around. Like I usually book them into next week. So like next week's already booked, but the week after that is open. People can get in touch with me anytime. I try and keep the schedule open so I can do that because it builds rapport in my audience. For you to say I have this amazing copywriting reputation and I'm the greatest, that only works for me because I'm out there interacting with people in small exchanges. If I only did these huge projects that are 5-figure copy jobs, I did 7 in 1 year, and that is as many as I would ever want to do because they all take at least 1 month worth of development when you're doing a launch. And so that puts a ceiling on it, and the whole time I'm doing this work, I'm not helping other people or building my name up or speaking at events or doing any of these other things. So for me to build my brand as a guru of copywriting, I knew I had to sort of leave the copy projects as a thing that I do when people come along that want them, but rather than promoting that as my core business, I do these smaller interactions and I consult with people before they even write the letter. And then I'll do a review after they write the letter or have their staff copywriter write the letter. I'll offer mentoring where I'll meet with your copywriter, once a week or whatever. And it's just prepaid hours for me to get on the phone with them. And it's a way for me to continue my reputation as the copywriter without actually having to write anything. And I still have my premium price tag on a product that most people in my audience can't even afford. They hope to one day, but that in itself is sort of an interesting lesson for how you can position yourself as a guru, to where you want to have products that your core audience cannot afford. Like Tony Robbins, I believe, I don't know what it is now, but I heard on the radio at one point the most expensive product he sold was like $1 million a year for his personal phone number. Like most of the people who buy stuff from him they don't have $1 million a year to blow on a phone number, but the fact that exists and the fact that they know it exists makes all the other cheaper things that he has to offer seem more affordable, and they actually really do experience more value from it because it's a fraction of that super expensive thing.
You see, I got to put a post on there about, if you want my personal phone number, you got to charge $1 million a year. I'm going to do that.
Right. I have a colleague who's active on a lot of internet marketing forums, and he didn't have anything in his SIG because he wasn't selling anything.
Hmm.
Normally, in your signature file, you put whatever your offer is.
Hmm.
So he said what you need to do when you're not selling anything, or even just leave it in there, is that you're available for personal one-on-one coaching for like $500 an hour. He's like, but I haven't ever done that. And I'm like, well, if somebody buys it, you're going to be happy, right? And if they don't, do you think it creates a negative perception of you for people to know that you charge $500 an hour for coaching? No, it certainly doesn't. But if you don't go out and tell people that, no one's ever going to know that you do it.
It's very true. That's a very good point. I love it. Well, Colin, I guess that is pretty much it for today. I've gone through all those questions. Guys, if you see down there, I've put a link down there that if you do want to contact Colin directly and see about maybe doing some work with Colin, he gets my double thumbs up. He's one of the best copywriters I know and a very good friend, and certainly couldn't say enough good things about him. And again, he's not paying me to say that, but no, like I say, his review service is phenomenal. I've used it myself in the past. He is my go-to guy. He's the person I recommend my coaching clients to when they need copy projects done, and is just an all-round superstar. So, Colin, thank you very much. I really appreciate your time today and doing the re-recording of this as well. It's very good of you to be allow me to do that. And have you got any last words?
No, just to say thanks, and I hope your audience gets a good bit out of this. And if any of you want to work with me, I look forward to doing that too.
Awesome stuff. And guys, yeah, there's some absolute gold nuggets in this today. The information in here is worth thousands and thousands of dollars, and you've got all that condensed into a 1 hour or so interview. So, Colin, thanks very much, and everyone else. We will be doing another one of these expert panel interviews very shortly. In the next month's one, we're going to be looking at doing product launches, what's involved behind the scenes. Copywriting and writing all the JV swipes is one part of that. That's what we covered today with Colin. But there's also a lot of other craziness that goes on behind the scenes of a product launch. And we'll be doing that and covering that in detail in the next one. So, Colin, again, thank you very much. Everyone else, take care. See you soon.
Bye, guys.